Well, hello, and welcome to another edition of Heavy Hands. I'm your host, Connor Rebuth. I'm leaving that in.
Nailed it.
Shut the fuck up. I'm leaving that in. Connor Rebush is the name. With me, as always, is Phil McKenzie. And, or should I say, und wir sind sehr glücklich zu Ryan Wagner haben. Ryan, willkommen.
Thanks for having me on, Connor.
Wait, what happened to your accent?
I'm doing a Connor accent right now.
Oh, wow, it's really
He's
good.
trying to fit in with our,
Meeting the racism with racism.
That wasn't racism. Come on. Wait till I have
the Anglophile
Gonna
audience.
call me a Nazi next?
Wait for the actual racism that I have saved for the later segments of this episode before you level that accusation at me. The fight
We'll
sites.
cancel you later.
What's that, huh?
We'll cancel you later.
Okay, thanks. The fight site's Ryan Wagner is here with us, as promised, to discuss two sensational main events from really just a great weekend of combat sports. We're going to talk on this episode about UFC 266's Alexander Volkanovski versus Brian Ortega. Brian Ortega now ending up on the wrong end of two of the worst title fight beatdowns in MMA history. Certainly in featherweight history. And I think that's perhaps more a testament to how good both Volkanovski and Max Holloway are than anything else. Somebody on Twitter was saying that you could argue that Volkanovski and Max Holloway are the two best pound-for-pound fighters in MMA. And looking at that performance last weekend and all of Max Holloway's performances, I think there's some real weight to that argument. After that, we are going to talk about the heavyweight boxing title fight from this weekend. Anthony Joshua versus Alexander Usyk. I think there are quite a few commonalities between those two fights, in fact. So those discussions may meld together over the gap between segments 1 and 2. And then after that, we're going to talk about the rest of UFC 266. Robbie Lawler versus Nick Diaz. Jessica Andrade versus Cynthia Calvillo. Perhaps Dwalishvili Moraes, maybe Hooker Haqparast, maybe Blades Rosenstrike. There's no other fights I'm missing, are there?
Can't think of any.
No, I certainly can't think of the most technical fighter in women's mixed martial arts.
Yeah.
And Ryan's personal favorite women's mixed martial artist.
I like that Phil is...
Lauren Murphy?
I like this, that instead of just bullying me, Phil is sort of bullying Ryan as well by forcing him to pretend to like Valentina Shevchenko. But yeah, we're going to talk about that too, I guess, when we get to it, if there's time. Volkanovski-Ortega. Ryan, it's been a while since we've had you on the show. I know you enjoyed this fight, and I know you were looking forward to it since our last podcast together. So why don't you kick us off? Give me your general thoughts. First of all, what were you expecting going into the fight, and how did it play out?
Yeah, I didn't really know what to expect from Ortega. Obviously, he's been out for so long, but also I said before the fight that I didn't think the way he fought KZ was going to work very well against Volkanovski.
Yeah,
I think the biggest advantage he had coming in is his ability to make organic reads and to draw them out with his jab and his lead hand volume.
Mm-hmm.
In Southpaw, he got a lot better at winning minutes against KZ. His ring craft looked better. He looked like a much more consistent process-based fighter, but he was never going to out-process Volkanovski. And I think he loses a lot of the dynamism in Southpaw. So I was kind of wondering whether we would see Ortega try to do that. And if he fought like he did against KZ, I expected it to go really poorly for him. But he did come out unorthodox, and he tried to use his jab to bait reactions and counter Volkanovski, and Volkanovski just immediately took it away.
Mm-hmm. How did he take it
Honestly, I am so amazed with Volkanovski. He's one of the best fighters I've ever seen. I love watching him. So he immediately got on the leg kicks heavily.
Yeah.
He was pounding Ortega's leg inside and out. Obviously, we see a lot of fighters stick with one. They like inside leg kicks or outside leg kicks, and you can adjust your stance to deal with that. Like Max Holloway's fights with Aldo. Even when Aldo was pounding his legs a little bit in the second fight, he could fight with his leg turned outwards a little bit more, and it mitigated the threat. With Volkanovski playing inside and outside kicks off each other, that takes that away. Because if you try to adjust one way, then it opens up the other kick. But once he got started with the leg kicks, Ortega never really had any opportunity to adjust. As soon as he tried something, Volkanovski would immediately pick up on that and use it to punish Ortega. I think really early he started picking up his rear leg, like he's about to throw a kick, and then landing the big right hand. He was using those little tie hop feints to feint the kick and get into range for punches. And the more the fight went on, the more he used those reactions against Ortega, and as he always does, began to build his offense until we were getting insane sequences where he'd like feint a level change, hand fight his way in, throw an inside leg kick, and then shift back into southpaw and throw a counter check hook whenever Ortega tries to do anything. And it just snowballed from there until Ortega, he wasn't getting the reads he needed. He wasn't able to set up his own offense because Volkanovski was so effectively countering him, and it was all downhill from there. I have a lot more thoughts, but I'm going to let you guys talk because I don't even know where to start on this.
That's fine. There's a lot to talk about. In a weird way, I doubt it will be much more focused than our pre-fight discussion because there was a lot to talk about in advance too. Phil, what do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's all like, great reads from Ryan as always, like, and always like an insane level of technical depth. I mean, one of the things that I noticed was just that, you know, I think we're going to be, as spoiler warning, Connor has already talked about this a little before we got into the recording, but, you know, feints were a big part of this. And I think, you know, one of the things that makes, and, you know, something that we mentioned last week, one of the things that makes Volkanovski so tremendously effective is his ability to combine feints with his ability to take whatever he's offered. Mm-hmm. So that he would almost always exit the exchange, even if these weren't, you know, Max Holloway style snowballing exchanges a lot of the time, but he would always exit the exchange having gone a layer deeper than Ortega, and just having taken something out of it. You know, so he would feint a step in jab, and Ortega would look to counter it, but then would see that it was a feint and would pull his counter. And then, you know, Volkanovski would see that due to like building his counter, he was weighted on his front foot, and then he would just kick him in the leg and get back out again.
Yeah.
He would take every small thing that he could in an exchange. Yeah. And at some points, I felt like this might have been slightly detrimental. I mean, particularly in some ways towards the end of the fight, because I felt like Volkanovski was sometimes unwilling to just take advantage of the fact that he could probably just bomb Ortega. Like, he could probably simply just crack him, particularly in the later goings of the fight. Like, I think you mentioned on Twitter, Connor, he could just, at certain points, just dart up the middle and hit him with the hardest right hand he possibly could.
He did discover that about midway through the fight. He was like, oh, lead rights will just land when I throw them. They'll land hard. And yeah, probably in the later portion, he honestly, I mean, I through no fault of his own, I think this was probably the first time we've seen Volkanovski tired in round 5 when Ortega had his like last moments of success. An impressive success it was, right? I mean, given that the man probably definitely should have been saved by his corner, the referee, or anyone in the building with a conscience, after round 3 or round 4. But, yeah, Volkanovski probably could have just like sat down and thrown 3 hard power punches and landed every one and dropped Ortega.
And, I think at that point, I think we also saw, you know, the other thing we called out, which I think, you know, sort of ties in with Ryan's point, is that, Ortega's original style was, just better built for beating Volkanovski than his, like current more like technical and composed style was. I mean, admittedly, if he'd come out, you know, fighting like he did late, he might have literally just got knocked out because, Volkanovski was landing some horrific counters on him throughout the fight. And I think part of what made Volkanovski tired was simple shock at the fact that Ortega was still alive. And, and the fact that we learned that had the ref not cheated, Ortega in the Holloway fight, that he would have probably come out and finished Max Holloway in that, fifth round.
Yeah.
So when we saw, just when Ortega just abandoned his idea of fighting as a technical fighter and just waded forward, just being I'm a tall guy,
right,
I can punch super hard, and if I just swing at Volkanovski's body, I will hit something. That actually started working for him frighteningly well.
Yeah, I mean, that is a very good point. We did talk about one of our major points was the idea of Volkanovski. One of our major points before the fight was the idea of Volkanovski thriving in the second, third, fourth layers of an exchange. He's not usually much of a same time kind of counterpuncher, but he will duck or slip or do a half step back and then come right back in with a hard shot. He's really, really good at those second beat or half beat counters. And it occurs to me as you say this that Ortega, so much of the idea of Ortega being kind of a one and done, setting traps but never expanding on them even when they work kind of fighter is just from the Korean Zombie fight. And this newer, more technical iteration, capital T there, of course, that Ortega of old, he did kind of just run at people throwing punches, and that really did seem to work. Again, I think Volkanovski being tired and stunned that Ortega was somehow putting up any kind of resistance, not to mention, winning the last round of the fight, had something to do with that after beating him.
He got off the leg kicks too in the fifth round, which I think was really big in allowing Ortega to do that.
Yeah, although I will say, I think part of the reason he got off them is Ortega did consistently start catching and countering those kicks.
Yeah. That was how it wasn't how the dicey ground exchange started, but
actually,
there were a lot of times
in round 3 he did catch a kick and knock him down with a left hand. It was it wasn't like a hard knockdown, but it was catching a kick that got him into that first guillotine.
You're right.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, and it happened throughout the fight with increasing regularity.
Yeah, as the fight went on, the most effective kicks Volk was landing were as counters. He would take a step back, and Ortega would try to step in with a jab, and he would slip it and land the kick on the counter. But increasingly, like you said, leading with kicks was actually pretty risky for Volkanovski.
His left kick to the body was really nice throughout the fight too.
Yeah.
He used it really well on the lead, both to pin Ortega in place along the cage and set up his offense, but also, like you mentioned, as a counter when Ortega was coming forward and trying to find entries to swarm with his hands.
Yeah.
Volkanovski would just slide back and throw up that lead leg body kick.
I love
something that you don't see a lot in MMA, but it was really lovely.
No, it was Volkanovski doing a Rashid Magomedov. Right? Fade back left.
You know your audience, Connor.
You really do.
We gotta fight. Hey, I've also been a longtime fan of Rashid. I love my, just slightly too technical to be interesting fighters.
Just unathletic enough to never contend.
But seriously, that keying in on the jab, anticipating the right hand coming after it, half step back, left body kick as you pull your head out of range. That is totally a Magomedov counter.
Oh yeah. That's his MO.
Yeah. And Volkanovski did it really well. So Ryan.
Who else is really good at
who's that?
Hop step kicks on the back foot?
Who's that? Anthony
Valentina
Joshua.
Shevchenko.
Oh God. It's not time for that yet,
you know
Ryan.
Your audience, Ryan.
Indeed I do. But anyways, moving on from that. This fight made me think about something that you brought up recently, your Nick Diaz article about him being one of the first modern fighters in regards to the volume meta.
Yeah.
I didn't read it, but I think I got the gist of it.
Thank you.
So I think Volkanovski and city kickboxing guys in general, but specifically Volkanovski, is very well optimized to kind of beat that new volume kind of meta in MMA.
Mm-hmm.
Not only did fighters start learning that obviously volume and activity wins fights, but they, especially recently, they've really been making strides in using that volume to gather information. So guys like Max Holloway, even Nick Diaz long ago, they'll use that light output, constant output to gather information on their opponents. And the more exchanges you get, the more you get them committing to your feints, reacting to your throwaway punches, the more information you have on how they're going to react.
Yeah.
So Holloway can throw like 8 punches that he doesn't care about, that he's not trying to land, just to see how you move. And then he can either maneuver your head into a poor position, make you take an inferior angle and trying to defend his junk punches, or he can just overwhelm you with that until he can land bigger punches. And guys have been learning how to bait reactions with those and really punish them.
Absolutely.
Volkanovski seems to have kind of built his game around defusing that.
Yeah.
This is something that'll come up in the Usyk-AJ fight a lot too. But right from the start of the fight, he was either denying Ortega jabbing range, so he's standing an extra step away, so Ortega couldn't use that jab to gather information. He could ignore all his jabs and jab feints because he didn't have the range to get them. And then when Ortega tried to jab in, Volkanovski could just counter or slide back because he didn't have the range he needed. And that kind of forced Ortega into much more predictable offense, rushing at him so Volk could counter. And you brought up Volk's counterpunches earlier. I've always thought Volkanovski isn't the most natural counterpuncher, but he does such a great job of forcing his opponents to make bad decisions that it allows him to really open up with those counters. And he did a great job punishing Ortega every time he got over aggressive.
Yeah, I think you could say there's a lot about Volkanovski's game that's a little rote. But he follows his like set patterns with like real authority and confidence. You know, it's like slip and then just 2 very hard, tight punches come off of that, defensive move. So I mean, what are you going to do as the average MMA fighter who's like, first of all, you've already, bridged too much distance, without any setup or disguise to your intentions because Volkanovski's got such great distance management. And, you're going to suddenly have defense after he's made you miss the shot? No, that's the time. Just let 2 hard shots go. It works. And yeah, I thought this was a great example of how Volkanovski's counterpunching does work. And it was consistent throughout the fight. He kept Ortega until the very end from ever building any momentum with the feints and then the counters that those, counters to the attacks that those feints forced out of Ortega. Phil?
I think it's just also worth noting how impressive it is, how mentally inexhaustible Volkanovski is.
Yeah.
Because, you know, there's a lot of the talk about how his cardio is absolutely disgusting, obviously.
Yeah.
But, it's simply the fact that, like, a lot of the reason why, people, I think, approached the information gathering kind of stage of a high volume metagame is that it's relatively easy and mentally untaxing to simply, you know, to throw a jab and then, you know, you have a branching structure that's built off your jab. And this is, you know, sort of these kind of sort of tree shapes are sort of quite relatively easy to learn.
Especially if you are touching the opponent with those shots. Like, the next level of difficulty are throwaway shots that you don't expect to land. That puts you into a sort of like simultaneous hypothetical fight, like Volkanovski is always having 3 hypothetical fights playing out in his head because so much of what he does is implication. It's just feints and threats and, anticipating the actual violence that comes after that. But, it's not just Derek Brunson who is tactile, right? Like everyone to a degree has an easier time building if they're getting to touch even just the opponent's guard. That feel of the range and the timing is really, really important in fighting when like your sense of distance is, I say this all the time, but your sense of distance is way more fragile than you think it is if you've never been punched in the face.
Oh yeah. The first thing you learn when you just start sparring is that you're nowhere near as close to them as you think that you are.
Yes.
And they are way closer to you than you think they are.
Yeah. So I'm totally with you, Phil, that it's incredibly impressive that Volkanovski can keep this pressure on and maintain, again, like a hypothetical pace on his opponents. He's doing the Max Holloway volume, but with fake punches, which is way harder.
Yeah.
And go on.
And it's just the fact that he has, so instead of it being, so the first Holloway fight is, the example of, which I think is sort of alludes to Ryan's point, is the example of, a fight where Holloway has a single node after which everything else is sort of unlocked, right? And that was his jab, and Volkanovski kind of took it away, and that was ended up being like a surprisingly dominant win for him.
Yeah.
But it's the fact that when Volkanovski enters, he always has, 5 or 6 options and 5 or 6 options behind that. Yeah. He rarely has 1 or 2 options. It's always, he's like feint, he's got feints for both hands. He's got his shift. He's got a low kick from both sides, and they are always arranged in different ways. And this is, I think, incredibly exhausting to actually do. People don't do it not because, they would rather have, less complicated games, but simply, I think, a lot of the time because they can't. I think it's the fact that he's not just he's not just like a sort of cold-blooded, cardio machine, but he's also, the guy is just a calculator.
It's processing
power,
man.
It's hard to have, to front load all your processing like that.
Yeah.
Like endlessly impressive that he can do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not only does his game, require him to be constantly building off his offense, like you mentioned, and actioning things that came earlier, but he also focuses a lot on taking away his opponent's game.
Mm-hmm.
So he ends up having to do a lot of adjusting. Whenever somebody starts to have success with something, or they start to counter one of his tools, or even just defend it, he'll immediately switch up and begin to attack that. Like when Max Holloway went southpaw, and I think their first fight, and immediately Volkanovski started the shifting right hands.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
He's constantly looking at what they're doing and figuring out how he can make that stop, which is often kind of a losing move in MMA. For a lot of fighters, it makes more sense to just worry about what you're going to do and focus on enforcing your game. But Volkanovski is one of the few fighters who can really think on the fly like that.
And I think that comes down to how consistently Volkanovski uses that volume of feints. And it is a truly insane volume of feints. It is like a non-stop implication of violence to just keep a tight grasp on the initiative of the fight. That, reacting to your opponent is either a good thing or a bad thing. It's great to have good reactions to your opponent, but if you are waiting to see what you're going to react to, that's a death sentence, especially in MMA where offense wins. But because he's constantly, from the very beginning of the fight, pressuring Ortega with these feints, backing him up all the way across the big octagon. This isn't the Apex Center octagon, just with feints, and getting his back all the way to the fence. There's a feeling of whatever Ortega throws back at me, I'm making him throw. And it's easier for me I'm staying in a position of control by coming up with a counter to that, because essentially everything Ortega does is kind of a counter to my pressure. He's reacting to me. There was speaking of adjustments, really early on, some of the first exchanges of the fight, Volkanovski was already adjusting tactically to what Ortega was doing. So he's backing him up to the fence, lots and lots of feints. He's already landing his low kicks. Ortega blitzes his way off the fence. He knows he shouldn't be there. So he just comes out. He kind of does what he did in the 5th round. He just comes out shifting 3-punch combination, sort of lands. Volkanovski kind of awkwardly gets away from it. He's just thrown a kick. All right. We reset. Volkanovski's pressuring Ortega again. Pressure, feint. He senses Ortega loading up for that blitz, takes a half step back, and then stops dead and extends like a ramrod jab that Ortega just runs face first into, completely kills his blitz off the fence. That's like in the first minute and a half of the fight. He's already made a key tactical adjustment to convince Ortega, maybe you should stay on the fence when I put you there. Don't be rude and try to get back to open space. This is where you belong. It's not just like incredibly mentally taxing what Volkanovski does. It has to be completely mentally debilitating to fight him. You can't process that much information when he is the one delivering all the information. You just
like every reaction you make feels like the wrong one, but not reacting gets you hit even harder.
Absolutely. So this brings me to a point that I think will eventually bridge us into our Joshua Usyk conversation. Feints were a huge part of this fight. They were a huge part of Usyk's win over Anthony Joshua. Two little guys fighting big, somewhat cumbersome finishers, and just doing a hell of a lot of hypothetical fighting against them. So we had two completely opposite, but also sort of very similar suggestions from like the resident technical analysts, at each of these main events. In Volkanovski-Ortega, they threw to Dean Thomas, who said that, Brian Ortega needs to deal with these feints, and the best way to do that is to assume each one is offense and step in and fire. Roy Jones Jr. over at Joshua Usyk, said that Anthony Joshua needed to deal with Usyk's feints, and the best way to do that was to assume that each one was actual offense and get the hell out of the way and protect himself, which to me is a really stark example of the contrasting mindsets between boxing and MMA. One is offense, offense, offense. One is preservation, safety, ensuring you'll get chances down the stretch. But Ryan, what should Ortega have done to deal with those feints?
I think what we saw in the 5th round from Ortega is what the fight would look like ideally for him if he was able to keep it more in his preferred range.
Yeah.
I think the overall most important thing for him would be to keep it in jabbing range. And to do that, he'd have to navigate the kicks. I think if he did try to check some of the kicks and he tried to counter them, he had more success with that late. But I think if he focused more on kind of mitigating that threat from the get-go, not just by reacting to the individual kicks, but by implementing tactics that would naturally punish them, like coming forward behind a light lead leg, counter kicking himself. And then if he was able to kind of build that threat and threaten Volkanovski with counters by lifting his lead leg while coming forward, then he could play that into feigning them into punches. Maybe something like we saw from Masvidal against Cerrone. But I think without being able to force the fight into punching distance and gather information with his jab to make the reads that he needs to punish Volkanovski, then there wasn't much of a consistent path to victory for him. Obviously, he had the Hail Mary subs, which, to his credit, they almost worked.
Worked.
Yeah. So how many of you guys, were either of you guys, as I was, just like, oh, it's over. Oh, shit.
Oh, yeah. I wasn't convinced. I was still riveted to the TV to see what Volkanovski would do, but goddamn, that first guillotine and the triangle. And it was such a, like, typically Volkanovski combination of grit and intelligence to escape both of those submissions in round 3. You know, he was immediately on the correct defense to the guillotine. He was like Joe Benavidez style, just going completely apeshit, kicking his legs, doing anything he could to loosen that mount.
He hit his neck super quick too. Ortega couldn't get a tight grip on that.
He tucked his chin, which it helps. As I said on Twitter, you can't choke me when I've got no nick. You know, I think it's a little easier for a guy like Volkanovski than it would be for others. But he tucked his chin immediately. It went from an arm in guillotine to a sort of half arm in, arm out when Volkanovski like half escaped his one arm and turned that into a frame. To fight the grip, and then he was also immediately framing on the hips that he was trying to buck the hell away from. So he was immediately like creating as much space, and again, it probably also helps that Volkanovski has these stout little arms. Those are some very difficult frames to just crush your way through if you're Ortega. And then like
he's insanely strong on the ground. It's honestly ridiculous.
Yeah, that comes through. And then just the connectivity, like how well Volkanovski flows in every phase, that really came through in those moments too. He escaped that guillotine. He did a pretty typical grappling escape on the ground. You know, he sort of baited the back take and then rolled really hard back into Ortega. Sort of got him into Darce territory. He dealt with that before it was ever really locked in. And then he ends up in the triangle and sort of a similar escape. He kind of baited both the armbar and the transition to mounted triangle. And the split second that Ortega tried to take that route that Volkanovski appeared to be giving him, Volkanovski exploded back into him and broke the triangle.
Yeah. Volkanovski did a great job keeping him square at first, when he was in the triangle. And then, Ortega tried to hook under the leg.
Yeah.
And then Volkanovski kind of extended the leg, and it kind of encouraged Ortega to grip higher on the leg, closer to the ankle, which slid him back and got him to that mounted position, but also loosened the choke a little bit.
Yeah.
So at that point, when he just hooked in the crook of the knee, there was still a real threat there that he could get the angle and finish the triangle. But by the time he locked up lower and took Volkanovski over, the triangle was basically gone at that point.
Yeah. But same pattern building approach in a way on the ground. As you see from Volkanovski on the feet. Just an incredible ability to go intentionally half-heartedly for one thing, to get the right reaction, to then go completely hard for the second and third things. And,
and just tremendous.
Oh my God.
Cold-hearted, focus on what to do.
And the ground and pound, Phil.
I am, struggling to catch my breath. I'm in the submissions of one of the nastiest guys to do it in the sport. I'm going to trick him.
Now's my chance.
Yeah.
I mean, and it was he almost fucking, a round that could have been Ortega's first of the fight is very arguably a 10-8 for Volkanovski by the end.
Yeah, that was one of the things I was thinking about, because it was really the one of the fun things about the fight is that, towards the end of it stripped away, Ortega's sort of more technical focus and sort of brought him back to his wilder, earlier style.
Uh-huh.
And this was really us getting to see classic Volkanovski. And you're like, oh yeah, this is what he was good at. I remember this.
Yeah.
This fight made me wish he wrestles more in the future, because I really love seeing him grapple. I think all the city kickboxing guys tend to have strong grappling instincts, even if they're not actually great grapplers. Even Adesanya would actually stop a takedown before trying to do a guillotine. Mm-hmm. And Volkanovski's grappling style for me is summed up by just perfect decision making. There was a real contrast between him and Ortega on the ground, because he was doing the right things even when he got himself in trouble. He stayed calm. He didn't panic. He didn't put himself in worse positions. Whereas Ortega, he's obviously super dangerous, and if he gets a hold of your neck, it can be over in a second. But he doesn't really fight. He doesn't use his grappling in a way that people who win and defend championships use their grappling.
He's never thinking of the next thing in the way that Volkanovski is. He was visibly defeated when those submissions were beaten by Volkanovski.
Yeah. That Darce choke, Volkanovski, as soon as he grabbed the underhook from half guard, Ortega immediately started looking to it and committing to it even when he didn't have the grip in. Whereas somebody like Volkanovski would look to just smush their face down, take a whizzer, and keep them on their back so he could do more damage later, rather than taking the low percentage out.
Yep. Always thinking of building the next layer. Volkanovski,
and to be fair to Ortega, it's always worked for him up to this point, but he's fighting different fighters now.
Yeah. He's fighting,
I will say,
if you take Volkanovski at his word, he's actually fighting a very normal fighter. Any of us could do what Volkanovski
I'm not a special athlete.
Oh, yeah.
It's just hard work.
Just rugby might.
Phil, you were going to say last word, and then we'll take a break and move on to the boxing.
I will say I was I like Ortega's focus on the singular finish does lead to some stunning moments.
Oh yeah,
that's almost finish that he got. I mean, it's such a pure MMA technique. He counters the leg kick, comes back with the left hand, and immediately is, through the knockdown, is wrapping up the neck and turns it into a mounted guillotine within, probably less than a second.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It ended up being this fascinating contrast of styles. We got to see both of these guys showing who they've become and also who they were. But you got to see the contrast between just someone who's really focused on winning rounds and has put incredible amounts of work into that. And you know, seeing someone who's worked on their finishing sequences, because that was, it was one of the best, level changing finishing, not phase changing finishing sequence that I've seen, you know, worthy of, you know, Henan Barao in his prime, or, who else is has been super good at chaining together strikes into submissions. But it was fantastic. And Ortega, he showed, I think he made for a great fight. It was one of those ones where it wasn't the Holloway ass kicking, where it just got worse and worse and worse over time.
Right.
He pulled himself back into it, and it was a fantastic performance. I'm not one of those ones who's super convinced that we're going to see a reinvigorated Ortega fight for the belt again.
Oh my God, at this point, how could we? We need to stop talking about how tough he is and start stopping the fight when he's getting the shit beaten out of him.
Yeah, right. Herb Dean's how many fingers am I holding up? Brian Ortega's 3. It's great. You sound great. Get back in there, kid.
What's a finger?
4 toes. Perfect. Yeah. Slick takedown, by the way. I know I said last word, but there's so much to say. It was a slick takedown in round 4. Just to speak of Ortega's toughness and continued determination to turn the fight around. He tried a blast double, which his corner was screaming at him for. Volkanovski defended it. Stocky little bastard. He gets under an over-under body lock. And just as he steps around to leverage that underhook, Ortega snatched his leg with an inside trip and got to his second guillotine attempt of the fight. And then, of course,
that was really nice.
Yeah. And then, of course, Volkanovski, defeated it and destroyed him.
He's Volkanovski. You can't do anything to him. Chad Mendes had his back and Volkanovski just shoved him off like a child.
It's unbelievable.
What are you going to do to that guy?
Unbelievable. Okay. Let's take a break. We've been at this for coming up on 40 minutes. That's fine. We don't get fights like this often. We're very happy to have Ryan Wagner here sharing his expertise. And we will continue to ask him probing questions in our next segment when we get to Anthony Joshua.
Just like Usyk did of Joshua.
What's that?
Just like Usyk did of Joshua.
Asking probing questions. That's right. More wonderful wordplay like this next.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out, the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it.
All right, welcome back to Heavy Hands. Phil, you said something about a robbery. Expand on that.
Anthony Joshua, obviously, getting robbed by Alexander Usyk. Clearly should have walked away, retaining his belt. Somehow Usyk managed to win.
Yep.
We had to get our token English guy on here to give that spiel.
Yeah. I actually do have something to say about this. But before I want to hear your thoughts, Ryan. I mean, lucky you, right? Did you know way back when you asked that, to come back on the show to talk about Volk-Ortega, that it would be the same weekend as one of the biggest fights in modern heavyweight boxing history? It's pretty cool.
Oh no, I only learned this was happening today, 3 days ago. People just DM me and be like, hey, boxing fight. And I'm like, have I heard of one of them?
That, I think, is
this time I actually have.
That's the correct way to approach the combat sports schedule. It's not worth trying to keep up with it. You'll go insane like Caposa. Just let people tell you when the fight is 3 days away.
Especially boxing. Somebody will be like, hey, the guy you like's fighting. And I'll be like, who's he fighting? And they'll be like,
some other guy. Great. So here's what I want to say, okay?
It's almost like I had to remind Connor that this fight was happening.
No,
just be like, Connor, quickly, pick the fight.
Hey, and on a split-second decision, I made exactly the right call. I basically just asked myself, what would the fight site guys not beat me up for saying? What will spare me their wrath? No, here's what I want to say. Nationalism is stupid. All right. Just at its core, being like, country good because me from there is one of the stupidest ways you can view the world. It's even stupider when it comes to supporting athletes. And one of my least favorite things in all of combat sports is when fans who invest their hopes in a fighter simply because he's the fighter from their country. These are usually fans who know fuck all about the sport they're watching. The kind of people who will see someone get knocked out fucking cold in 3 rounds and be like, wow, he threw the fight, because they've never seen a thrown fight and have no idea what it looks like. Those people are the quickest to turn on the fighter that they supported. And that has been my least favorite thing about this heavyweight boxing fight, are the number of Dave and then a series of numbers English Twitter accounts who have been on Twitter saying Anthony Joshua fought a terrible fight. He really let me down. He couldn't let his right hand go. What was wrong with him? That is bullshit. Because
so are we all in agreement that this was maybe one of the best fights Joshua has ever fought?
Absolutely. I thought Joshua.
I don't watch him a lot, but he looked better than I've ever seen him before.
Absolutely. I thought Joshua fought a great fight. That's why it's such bullshit. It's such a stupid fucking way to approach combat sports or any sports in general. These people are blinded to the fact that Anthony Joshua fought probably the best fight of his career against the toughest and most unique opponent of his career. He did a great job, man. He adjusted mid-fight to Alexander Usyk and gave him serious trouble down the stretch before Usyk made the final adjustment and turned it back around. It wasn't razor close or anything. I thought Usyk was a pretty clear winner, but I thought Joshua did a great job. And I just want to say fuck you to all you dumbass fish and chips eating bastards like Phil over here who are mad at your boy for losing. And because it's so hard for you to give credit to the non-British guy. You're going to be like, oh, Anthony Joshua failed me. You don't exist to Anthony Joshua. Anthony Joshua fought a great fight. Okay, Ryan.
Yeah, honestly, I don't talk to boxing people because I don't hate myself that much, but just
you talk to MMA
just
people.
Seeing some of the people Kyle's been retweeting, just random British people with gender critical or whatever in their fucking bios, who are why didn't AJ pressure? Why didn't he turn into a pressure machine and just keep beating Usyk's body up?
Yeah.
I wonder why the person who had all of his weapons taken away throughout the fight and has never looked like he can really pressure anyway, didn't just turn that up. But like we said with Ortega Volkanovski, this was really decided by Usyk controlling the pace, the range, and freaking AJ out consistently with his feints.
Yeah.
And he was doing a similar thing to what Volkanovski did, where he was keeping it out of jabbing range. So AJ couldn't get any reads off his jab early in the fight. Usyk could just ignore all of his jabs and his jab feints because they didn't really have a chance of landing, but they also weren't giving Joshua any information that he could work with. He later learned how to use his jab to intercept Usyk a bit and actually did a good job baiting out counters. Mm-hmm. But for the first 5 or so rounds, Joshua's jab did very little for him. And without having that jab to work with, he was having a hell of a time setting up any of his rights. He's never been the most natural in terms of punch selection or setups. So without that, the feel of his jab, Usyk had an easy time reading the right hand, and he was having a lot of success baiting it out and setting traps too. Not only was he keeping Joshua moving with his angles, but he would lean outside his lead hand 3 times rhythmically and then pretend to do it a 4th time. So AJ would flash his jab and then he'd only slip inside it and counter. Mm-hmm. So Joshua not only had to contend with not being able to gather information with his jab or to use it for a setup, but Usyk was consistently punishing it. And like you mentioned, for Joshua to come back later and adjust after 5 or so rounds, it seemed like it was going to snowball harder for Usyk, and it eventually did that. But Joshua did a great job in staving it off for a little bit.
Yeah.
I really liked his counter right hand. Mm-hmm. So with Usyk's constant feints, his constant footwork, and just the way he was building his clever setups on entry, Joshua couldn't land power punches on the counter until he started going to the body later. But that light outside slip straight right was really nice for him. When Usyk would enter with his feints or his light jabs, there wasn't enough time for Joshua to land power shots. But he eventually learned that he could just kind of stick his right hand out there and let Usyk run himself onto it.
Yeah.
And that did a lot of work for him. Once he established that, he started hooking around Usyk's guard, whereas before, without that soft right hand counter, his wide right hooks wouldn't have been much threat for Usyk, because he got him looking at the right hand and then went wide with it. So I was really impressed with Joshua, who's not somebody I ever expected clever adjustments like that from.
Right. He kept a very cool head. I think a consistent problem for Anthony Joshua throughout his career, and you can hardly blame him because he looks like freaking Hercules, is like taking steam off of his punches and just fighting relaxed. And the fact that he managed to do that better than ever against Alexander Usyk, especially after the way the first 4 rounds of this fight went.
Yeah.
Where Usyk was just was strafing him, and I think he hurt him pretty decently in round 3. He was landing all of the cleanest punches and taking very, very little damage in return. And
he really took it to AJ early, and he was still in there.
Yeah.
He was still calm and making adjustments.
Yeah.
I was really impressed with that.
I think strafing is in general a good point, because we sort of mentioned this with regards to the Volkanovski-Ortega fight before in the preview. This was one where not just like the foot speed, but the lateral the lateral movement dimension was all on one fighter. So I think, with Volkanovski, his ability to set up, use his lateral movement to set up his angles and land, it was generally, it was either the shifting entries determining, which was going to be his power hand. There's also the inside-outside low kick. With this, I think it was the fact that for a lot of the early going, until he had the right hand out, Joshua was playing whack-a-mole with his jab.
Yeah.
And Usyk was by far the first one to, really unlock either, strafing round and hooking. He was basically jabbing and hooking long before Joshua was able to bring it out. And he was also, just countering Joshua's jab with his own, I don't even know what the punch is called. But when he was lacing his own jab over Joshua's, like a cross counter, but in closed stance.
Yeah.
But it was the fact that he was able to build this up, and Joshua was constantly just turning, trying to jab. And I think, the right hand was really one of the keys to unlock just, taking away the lateral movement. And then, it allowed his own left hook to come alive.
Yeah.
But he was constantly behind in the kind of lateral exchanges for the beginning, 4 rounds.
Yeah, I'm not sure that punch has a distinct name, by the way. You could call it a lead hand cross. That's kind of how Archie Moore would refer to that sort of loaded up straight punch. You could call it a jab. You could call it a very long right hook, or an overhand jab, maybe. I don't know. But I'm in total agreement with everything both of you guys just said. I thought, I want to give credit to Anthony Joshua here, because of course Usyk was unbelievably impressive, and this is such a feat to have won the championship, unify the championship the way he did down at cruiserweight, and then to embark on a whole new, equally successful career up at heavyweight, especially visibly. He was so little compared to Anthony Joshua. It was a real visual contrast. But I want to give Anthony Joshua some credit for doing what, say, Brian Ortega could not against Volkanovski. He did not answer this volume of feints and the lateral movement with just blind offense. That was not the solution that he came up with. He didn't just try to power his way through and soak up tons and tons of damage as a result. First of all, Usyk's lateral movement was on point from the very beginning. I actually thought Joshua adjusted to it really calmly and well. He, in fact, through a lot of the early going, he was maintaining the center of the ring, just pivoting on his back foot. He wasn't moving around more than necessary, was just keeping Usyk in front of him, adjusting as quickly as possible. And the best way to do that is a good back foot pivot. And for those who don't know, you pivot on your lead foot. That's the fulcrum. So, your body's position in the ring or cage changes. You pivot on the back foot. That's the fulcrum. So where you're facing changes, but your body remains in the same place. So if you want to hold center ring and turn to face an opponent who's trying to run circles around you, back foot pivot, is the way to do that. Joshua did it very well for quite a lot of the early going, even as he was sort of being picked apart. The second thing is he used Usyk's, answer to his awkward pawing jabs against him. I mean, that is how he found those soft counter right hands, was he started anticipating Usyk getting under his jab. He would throw it out there or sometimes just feint it, and then anticipating where Usyk's head was going, catch him with a really quick, relaxed, short, straight right hand. And he did that quite a lot. I mean, it shows he's fighting on like the sort of conceptual level that Usyk is usually dominant in, and seeing forward into the next layer or two of the exchange to find that clean shot. That was also something I don't think we've really seen from Joshua very much before. He kept pace with Usyk so well in that kind of way. Ooh, the other shot Joshua found that worked so well. The right uppercut to the body.
Yeah.
That was such a good punch. I have always loved that punch, and it's a fantastic counter. I think perhaps especially so for a guy like Usyk, who is quite front foot heavy and comes in really sort of forward inclined. The angle is there for that shot, and it landed hard. That was one of the few shots that Joshua was actually able to sit down on with any consistency and still have a chance of landing it.
It's good for a big, slow guy too, because you don't need to. It's not like where you're slipping outside a jab and trying to land a right hand where you need to be super sharp and quick. You don't even have to win the exchange for the uppercut to the body to work really well.
Yeah.
You can use it whenever they come in, anytime they're extended onto you, and you're in range. It's not something that you have to immediately slip and fire. There's a little bit more of a cushion for you to use that. And It really helped AJ when his power counters to the head weren't really working.
Don't really have to change your position. Don't have to be particularly fast. You got a big target that's hard to move out of the way.
It attacks the lateral movement as well, which is something that I do think he did a good job defensively addressing the lateral movement early.
Mm-hmm.
He did a good job mitigating how much Usyk could work with that, but he didn't really have anything to punish Usyk for it, which hurt him a lot early. And that uppercut to the body helped when Usyk was trying to angle away a little bit.
Yeah. While we're upsetting boxing fans who may be listening to this, I'm going to make another comparison to MMA. We've already compared Usyk's performance to what Volkanovski did to Ortega, drowning him in feints. I think the final adjustment that Usyk really made was more of a Max Holloway adjustment.
Yeah.
Yeah, overloading.
Exactly. At a certain point, it was like, what if I turn each of these exchanges into a 5-second long blitz of 6 or 7 punches? And I honestly, I think it would have been risky early, but it's probably the kind of thing that would have worked at any point to a degree. Cause Anthony Joshua is cumbersome, ponderous compared to Usyk. And, as we have seen in numerous fights, once he overreacts on one defensive move, each successive adjustment he tries to make gets sloppier and sloppier. He will paw at something and then get, like say the first big left hand Usyk landed, Joshua does this way exaggerated, like pawing defense with his right hand and gets cracked. If you force him to try to defend himself after a moment like that, he starts ducking and flinching. His arms completely leave his face. He becomes wide open. We saw that like when he fought Ruiz, for example. Or he just starts throwing back with really tense, loaded up punches that a quick little fighter like Usyk can get right through. Excuse me. But I thought Usyk waited for the perfect time to do that, honestly. Joshua was finally starting to fade. It had been a super fast-paced fight by heavyweight standards. And at a certain point, he was like, I just have to drown this guy in volume and pressure. And he started stringing together some really long, scary combinations, just extending the exchange, following Joshua out of the pocket, re-countering whatever counters Joshua tried to throw, just not letting him reset. And I thought that was perfectly timed and absolutely sealed what could have otherwise been a very close decision for him.
Usyk has a brilliant way of extending exchanges where he makes it look like he's about to bail, and then the guy can either try to attack back or take a breath for a moment, but halfway through it, he's right back on them. And it's the same kind of thing that Max Holloway does. Like he'll jab in, throw a combination, and then take like just a half hop step back, not where he's actually out of range, but where it looks to the guy he's fighting like he's about to get out. And then they'll either just pause and be like, oh, okay, I can breathe, or they'll try to attack back. But he's just leaving that space in there, like to trick them. And then he's waiting on their counter to punish it if they attack back. And if not, then he'll come in with some more throwaway punches and immediately put them off again. And when you're in that, when you feel somebody swarm you and then they leave a momentary reprieve, it sucks. There's like a feeling of desperation. And then when you feel them back on you before you can do anything, it's just incredibly demoralizing.
Yeah. It's sort of like, philosophically, it's kind of like what they tell you to do when you're like dealing with a locked in submission defense, right? If you're trying to wrench someone's arm free for the armbar and they've got their arms figure forward, you relax for just a half second so that they think, oh, now's my chance to readjust my grip and then boom, you rip it free the moment that they respond by relaxing as well. I'm going to shock some people by saying this. Usyk does it better than Max Holloway. Cause it's not always just a step back. A lot of the prettiest ones in this fight were pivots. He would come in, 3-shot blitzing combination, pivot to an angle, and that would be the little half beat of rest. And then he comes right back in. So he's not just giving you a chance, to think that, he's not just giving you a glimmer of hope that maybe it's over and then crushing your dreams. He's forcing you to adjust your position and have to reface him. Even more shocking when he piles back in with, punches 4, 5, 6, and 7.
His punch selection works so well with his angling too. He'll throw like Phil mentioned, those choppy kind of jab overhands over the top. His left straight to the body really helped in like getting Joshua focusing on the center line and then letting him pivot off. He landed some really sneaky up jabs and uppercuts later in the fight.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
His punch selection kind of reminds me of Lomachenko in that he'll throw a lot of punches that they look weird and you're like, why did he do that? But they're hard to see coming and they come in at a weird angle. Like his really long kind of left hook or overhands that sneak behind AJ's guard.
Mm-hmm. Same shit he did to Tony Bellew, working the overhand or the wide left off the straight left. And that like pivot reset, that proactive pivot reset is 100% a Lomachenko move. Not that he created it or invented it, but these guys are and have been for a long time training partners, or at least sharing the same coaches, and that is something they share in common. But anyway, I just want to say Anthony Joshua fought a great fight. He did his best. He did better than I expected, and put up a really, really stiff effort against a guy who is pound for pound one of the greatest fighters in the world. So
and it looked like he did the best that he could possibly do.
Yes.
And that doesn't strike me as a fight that AJ has much room for improvement on unless he just finds something huge and sparks Usyk out.
Yeah. I mean, I think those last 4 rounds, they just show that when he wants it, there is a gear that Usyk has that Joshua just doesn't.
Yep.
He can just fight and think at a faster pace than Joshua.
One more myth busting segment. I've heard some people say that like AJ should have used his size and leaned on Usyk.
Oh no.
AJ tried to clinch up a little bit in the later rounds and Usyk just got inside bicep control every single time and shoved him off like it was no problem.
Here's some combat sports nationalism for you. He's a British fighter. He can't infight. Sorry, folks. He doesn't know how to infight. He's just not good there.
Don't have the wrestling background.
Yeah, using his size is just trying to fall on Usyk.
Yeah. And
then Usyk knows what to do, so it didn't work at all.
Yep. Yeah. Honestly, I wouldn't mind seeing if given that apparently they are going to rematch, cause Joshua's got, pulls a lot of weight in England and got that, into the contract. I would like to see Usyk press him on the inside a little more. I really think he could probably mess him up there. It'd be like Andre Ward versus Sergey Kovalev, but worse. Not that he's as good as Ward on the inside, but Joshua is really kind of a void there, as far as I can tell. Yeah, good fight from Anthony Joshua. Shut up, you lousy fucking limey bastards who were shitting on him just because you had unrealistic expectations of what kind of fighter he was. He did way better than he should have, and Alexander Usyk is genuinely one of the best fighters on earth right now.
Usyk's the fucking man. I love him.
He is. All right, one more break. When we come back, there was apparently a women's flyweight championship fight and some other stuff too after this.
Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. You can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show.
Okay, welcome back to Heavy Hands. We are just going to run through all the chaff on this UFC 266 undercard, starting with the chaffiest piece of all, Valentina Shevchenko versus Lauren Murphy. It was a great showing, guys. Honestly, I can't lie. I thought Valentina Shevchenko was putting on the performance of her career. She came this close to getting that decision win that she has been trying for in this flyweight division. She almost fought it perfectly, and then round 4, about halfway through, just accidentally landed a clean punch on Lauren Murphy and knocked her out. But I have faith. I think she can get that perfect, boring decision next time out, and I don't think she should give up.
She's already got it. Her magnum opus is still going to be the Carmouche win.
Oh God.
One so bad I still cannot physically recall a single thing that happened in it.
I don't think there was a single thing that happened.
But yeah, Ryan, you love Valentina.
Yeah.
Explain why you love Valentina so much.
Tell me about Valentina, Ryan, since you love her.
I like her clinch game a lot. There wasn't a lot of clinch work in this fight. There was still some nice entries. Murphy barely tried to punch her, but a couple times when she did try to punch, Shevchenko would do that thing where she either slips outside the right hand and catches the head and arm, which is really nice because it lets her either go to work right away with knees or gives her a really good position to start turning them and working for a takedown. Or she'd do the duck and come up with an underhook. Her clinch entries I like a lot. Like I said, they give her in 50-50 clinches when she's like in an over-under. She's still pretty good, but the big thing that gives her an edge and the big thing that makes me kind of care about her is how she uses those really slick clinch entries to immediately get a dominant position, and then she can work right away from that with a big throw or going on offense. And she did that, yeah. There was like 3 times in this fight. Those happened.
Wow.
The rest of it was
That's
her...
a big number.
Yeah. Her trying to play the body kick off the head kick and just not really getting any head kicks. And then doing the thing where she just like punches that air until you run away and kicks you in the leg. She does a lot of that, what we were talking about, denying people the chance to gather information, like Volk and Usyk do. Basically,
Yes.
80% of her style is just, no different than Usyk. But her whole thing is standing outside of jabbing range and just ignoring everything you do with your lead hand because nobody she's fighting is good enough to actually get in with their lead hand without tipping their hand and showing her what they're going to do. If they throw their rear hand, she'll catch it with her own rear and pivot off with a check hook or just duck into the clinch. Yeah. And that 2-part gambit is enough to freeze almost everyone she fights.
Yep.
So she was very effectively denying Murphy the chance to make any reads or prompt reactions or gather information, but also Murphy doesn't know how to use Google.
Yes. Sadly true. Yeah, I want to say, like, I started watching this fight and then immediately started fast forwarding it and then thought, no, I will not do that. That is the wrong thing to do as an analyst. And I had it running in the background whilst I browsed my phone instead.
It is like a wired in, it's a reflexive impulse. The fight starts, you're like, oh, something's interesting happen at some point. I'm just going to jump forward 10 seconds at a time, for that Valentina highlight. Yeah.
Except for me, it was like a round, and then I was like, no, I will watch the rest of this fight, sort of.
I'll listen to the audio.
And I want to be complimented for it.
Yeah. You know, my favorite part of the fight was where, Valentina, like, had Lauren Murphy badly hurt and then decided to take her down. And then, afterwards, Daniel Cormier was like, do you think you could have finished her more efficiently if you hadn't taken her down? And she said, yes, thank you. I finished very good. That was great. She's so used to being complimented that she just assumes absolutely every question is a compliment. And fair enough, because after that, DC was like, can I get a picture with you? Which was pathetic. That was the most pathetic. That's worse than Tyron Woodley getting the tattoo.
It's such a DC thing to do, though.
Oh my God. So yeah, you know, there's not really a whole lot to say, to be honest.
It happened.
You're pointing out things that, all you can do is point out things that we already know Valentina is good at, because none of these fights, other than that Jennifer Maia one, reveal anything new whatsoever. She has sensational distance management. She's incredibly powerful. She's very proactive, and when she gets to those clinches, like you said, Ryan, she does not waste time, with the angles that she finds, sort of like what I was saying about Arman Tsarukyan's wrestling a couple weeks ago. She'll get in, she's got her underhook, she'll get to the angle. She treats the angles in the clinch as if they are angles at striking distance, and consequently she capitalizes right away on whatever openings she gets. And, she did all that stuff again. Okay. Robbie Lawler versus Nick Diaz. Not as depressing as it could have been. Phil. I'm gonna rub your nose in this, you son of a bitch. You said, looking at Nick Diaz's last 3 fights before his untimely retirement 6 years ago, that, he had become just a low output fighter. And,
I don't think I said that.
You said that he can't maintain output. He sucks now. And I believe you said he was a pussy bitch.
Yeah, that does actually sound like me.
I'm going to drop in the audio from the episode just as proof right here. All right. So you've just heard Phil say what I said he did. Well, there was at least some discussion, right, about Nick Diaz's volume waning, later on in his career. And my point was, look, I think these are just exactly the wrong matchups for Nick Diaz. I would never expect him to put out output against Anderson Silva. GSP threatened too many takedowns, and we know from way back in his career that if you can do that to Nick, you're going to severely inhibit his volume. Likewise, Carlos Condit just did not stand in front of him at all. And even that was still a relatively high output fight. Here we had a guy who stood right in front of him the entire time, albeit in the superior cage position, and Nick Diaz threw like 800 punches. So, in that respect, kind of a classic Nick Diaz fight.
Yeah, I mean, this fight was it was actually genuinely really fun.
Yeah.
It looked like it was the kind of best case scenario, Couture Big Nog, Lil Nog Shogun 3.
Yep.
Kind of veterans fight where they both just get to show off a bunch of, the skills that they've learned. And, we talked about this a bit before the episode, but it was really a lot of Robbie Lawler's defense being A, very good for MMA, but B, also being predicated on waiting for the opponent to finish so he can kill them.
Yeah.
So he was just kind of storming in on Diaz, trying to pick off shots and roll with them and catch him on his elbows and all this other kind of stuff. And Diaz was like, oh, is he going to wait for me to finish? I'm going to throw forever.
Yep.
I'm going to keep throwing forever. But there was also the fact that, I think that Diaz he looked physically awful, and I think just is incapable of throwing hard shots now.
Yeah, he was never a quick man, Nick Diaz.
But there were always these points where in his combinations where he would just be, he would pour and pour and pour away at someone, and then suddenly he would just crack them, and they would be like, what the hell was that?
Yeah.
It happened to Lawler in their first fight. And he just didn't do that here once.
Yeah.
There was no strike that I saw from him where I was like, that looked like it really hurt.
I think he tried. I just think it used to be that the 1 in 10 power punch from Diaz used to be both surprisingly quick and surprisingly powerful. Mm-hmm. And now when he was going for them, it was like suddenly the volume would break and Robbie Lawler could see the power punch coming. It was slow.
It was always like a rhythm change thing, but he didn't really have the ability to set a different rhythm than his big punches were coming on.
And in fact, they were
the same, and then he loaded up for the big punches.
Exactly. There was instead of being surprisingly quick and it nails you, there was in fact an extra beat that interrupted the flurrying, and let Robbie Lawler in on the fact that the power punch was coming.
Yeah. And other than that, Lawler was just, again, you could see why Lawler would still probably lose this fight if Diaz was, intact. Because of that simple fact is that he would wait for Diaz to be done, and you just can't do that. You can't let people go that deep into their offensive fusillades, in the same way that Aldo couldn't against Holloway, is that you just, at some point, you just run dry. You cannot defend against everything. But with this, it didn't matter, because Lawler just kept coming forward and pinning Diaz up against the cage, and eventually Diaz would, Lawler would either just punch through one of Diaz's shots, or Diaz would actually end his combination, and then Lawler would just start crushing him to the body and the head. And Lawler was also kicking him to the body, kicking him to the legs and body. It really was, it really did look like this is the guy who has been staying with the sport all this time.
Yeah.
And this is the guy who, is trying to recapture his old brilliance. But in general, it felt like Shields or Anderson Silva, where, Diaz's volume could just be walked through. And I think Lawler was actually in a lot of ways respecting him by not walking through it as much as he could.
Yeah.
Because he was like, I don't want what happened to me last time to happen again. I don't want to suddenly lash out of nowhere and just knock me dead. But I think as the fight went on, he just realized that couldn't happen anymore.
Yeah. And I'm going to be fair to Robbie Lawler. There were a couple of moments, just a couple, where it was like a real flash of classic Nick Diaz. Like right at the start of round 2, Diaz threw, I think it was like a right hook to the body and then a left hand over the top right after it. And here's the thing, man, people have flip-flopped so much on Nick Diaz, this happens all the time as time goes on. First, he was the best boxer the UFC had ever seen. He's an incredible boxer. Then, of course, killjoys like me are like, actually, his technique sucks. And then the killjoys are forced to then stand their ground and defend Nick Diaz against the new generation of fans who were like, actually, he always sucked. He relied on his chin. He's a joke. Here's the thing. Nick Diaz, as I said in my article this week, was way ahead of his time as a fighter who moderated the power of his shot in order to elevate his output, and used that output to then make the power shots more effective while also drawing power and therefore stamina out of his opponents. It worked for a long time against a wide variety of guys. He had a knack of making everybody, even guys who didn't tend to rely on their power, look like dumb sluggers by just putting this pressure on them and making them throw out of panic. Now that is pace fighter. That's such a normal thing now that I think people think of it and they're like, oh, dumb guys do that. Colby Covington does that. So there's no nuance to it. But that's not true. And I think we still saw here that in addition to being a super fast-paced fighter, Nick Diaz, while somewhat lacking in the finer points of technique, is a very good boxing tactician. His combinations are still really smartly put together. there is an idea of attacking from different angles that is just wired into the way that he punches. The first punch in a combination almost always comes from like exactly the opposite angle of the punch that follows it. It's an uppercut and then it's an overhand. It's a left hook and then it's a right hook. It's a punch straight down the middle and then it's a punch around the side. And I'm gonna say while I kind of agree, I think Robbie probably could have just tanked them and landed harder shots in a 50-50 exchange. I understand why he was like really conscious of being sharp defensively, because it's a very taxing kind, even as slow as it is now, it's a very taxing kind of combination punching to stay ahead of without getting clipped by something you don't see coming.
Yeah, Nick Diaz's combination punching, his rhythm manipulation, his shot selection were all genuinely revolutionary for MMA. Mm-hmm. And not even just back then. Like, if you put him in the modern game, he would obviously not be completely prepared to deal with a lot of modern fighters. But all those things we mentioned, his combination punching, the shot selection, his rhythm, would all stand out as very atypical for MMA fighters. And I think he's kind of a precursor to Holloway and guys like that you mentioned, not only just with the pace and the combinations and everything, but the way they use shot selection is really kind of unique to MMA and also rare in MMA. With the small gloves, you don't have to really properly throw every punch with your hips like you do in boxing. If you have your fist near a guy's head, you can just kind of jam it in there and it's fine. Like, you're not going to knock a guy out with that, but you'll pop his head back, get them thinking about it, and you can use it to set up your harder shots. And Max Holloway and Nick Diaz will both do that. They'll throw really awkward kind of arm punches that have surprising pop on them. They're not going to stun people, but like I said, they get your attention and you don't like them. And they don't have to commit their hips or shoulders, so they can just be picking away at you with that and then smash you with a hard shot to the body or a hook to the head out of nowhere. And guys aren't used to dealing with that because it's not how anybody punches, really.
Yeah. He was also, by the way, it puts you in a position where you just have the initiative. You're just touching. You have a great feel for what the opponent's going to do next. And it was one reason that Nick was, another misconception that's getting worse, was better at avoiding whatever came back at him than people give him credit for now.
Yeah, it was all, because not only was he not committing, but he was also just watching the opponent the whole time. You know, the classic level change with your eyes closed. I think they were mentioning this on the broadcast.
Curtis Blades did it.
Like Curtis Blades, yes. Still, I'm pretty sure this was also I'm shitting on the heavyweights for a while when Velasquez knocked out Big Nog. People were like, man, that was a great combination that he threw. Like, he wasn't looking at him at all. He was just punching above his own head.
Yeah, that is still in many ways a standard of MMA punching. Nick Diaz has done thousands of rounds with good amateur and pro boxers. Andre Ward respects the Diaz brothers for a goddamn reason. They can box in a lot of the intangible ways that MMA fighters can't. And maybe not all of that comes through in MMA as the sport continues to develop, but yeah, I think it felt good, honestly. It was a good opportunity to appreciate, I think, and reevaluate Nick Diaz's importance to the sport. And also, good for Robbie Lawler. He got one back.
I think the important thing to take away from this fight for me is that, in his last couple of fights, I've thought it was pretty obvious that Lawler was shot. One of the biggest signs that somebody doesn't have it anymore is when they completely lose their ability to throw volume.
Yes.
Now that we've seen Lawler throw 100 punches per round in this fight, it's become very clear to me that he was actually in great form against Colby Covington, and it was just that everything Colby was doing prevented him from throwing volume.
Yeah, Colby Covington is just that good.
He really is. And as for Nick Diaz, I'll always remember him as Gleison Tibau's fourth best win.
All right. Let's talk about some other fights, real quick before we wrap up. On that note,
just a brief question before that. Mm-hmm. Is Khabib the number one?
Yes. Yeah, Rory wasn't in his prime, so it has to be Khabib.
Nice.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, that's it, folks. That is it for this week's edition of Heavy Hands. Thank you so much for listening. Some of what we just talked about is going to be in a bonus episode on our Patreon. So check out the Heavy Hands Patreon if you want to hear more about the UFC 266 undercard and probably talking shit about Johnny the Greek as well. I don't think I'm going to leave that in the main show. Too mean. Most of it was said by Ryan Wagner, who was kind enough to join us today. Ryan, thank you so much. Where can people find you online, and what stuff of yours would you like them to check out?
Thanks for having me on, Kyle. Kyle, why the fuck did I call you Kyle?
That hurt worse.
I'm reading Twitter and I just saw Kyle say
that
something
hurt
about
worse
Usyk,
than anything else you said to me. Do you think I'm as old as Kyle? I'm not.
Do you want me to answer that honestly?
Where can people find you online, Ryan?
Yes, you can find me on Twitter at Ryan A. Wag, MMA. You can find my work at thefightsite.com. I don't really do work anymore, but you can find the work I used to do there. And if you like our content, please subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/fightsite. You can get custom articles, custom video breakdowns. And if you're a fighter yourself, you can subscribe to our scouting service. We'll take a look at all your fights or your training footage and tell you what you can improve on and give out suggestions. So definitely check that out if you like MMA analysis.
Says he doesn't work there anymore. Delivers the plug like a true veteran of the game. We'll see, Ryan. You'll be back. We've all been burned out before, okay? I'm burned out about 90% of these episodes. Yeah, you'll be back. Thank you so much again, Ryan. Always a pleasure to have you on. One of the best analysts in the game. I hope we do get to see more work from you down the line. But also it's probably good for you if you don't. Find Phil and I on Twitter at BoxingBush, BUSCH. That's me, at Evil Greg Jackson. That's Phil. Once again, check out the Patreon. Your second bonus episode for this month will be more UFC 266 undercard discussion with Phil, myself, and Ryan. And we will be back next week to talk about an event that I know Ryan really wishes he had not sort of shot his wad and come on this episode. Thiago Santos versus Johnny Walker. What a main event, folks. It's actually not that bad a card. It's not as bad.
No, it's the whole thing has like a like stupid pulpy entertainment vibe to it. I'm not going to lie.
My favorite Muay Thai fighters are the ones that do a ton of capoeira kicks.
Yep.
There's some appeal for weird sickos like Phil and I, so I think we will have some interesting things to say. That'll be on next week's episode. Until then, oh, by the way, check out my article.
Wait a minute. How do Thai fighters throw capoeira kicks when they're so planted all the time, though? It is a mystery.
Yeah, they don't have footwork. Explain that, Ryan.
Only Thiago Santos can do it. It's a miracle.
We're going to have Ryan on after next week's card to explain to us the finer points of the Muay Thai clinch.
Thailand hasn't discovered that yet.
Until then, thank you all so much.
Plug your Nick Diaz article because you haven't done it yet, Connor.
Oh, right. Read my article, Nick Diaz, the first modern MMA fighter. I'm going to try to come out with something. Maybe it'll be about feints and therefore be about both Volk-Ortega and Joshua Usyk, but no promises yet. Whether or not that comes out, read Nick Diaz, the first modern MMA fighter. A quick little piece, but I was pretty pleased with how it turned out. And we will talk to you next week. Until then, if you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.